Hey folks, welcome to another Broken Meeple Anthology. Yes, this one is for the purposes of KOSMOS Games, and in a lighter sense, their cousin Devir Games. The idea being that when I went to the expo, I met up with KOSMOS Games. They produced some great stuff, particularly in the two-player game range, and they offered me a few review copies to look at, and it kind of seemed like, well, I don't want all my single reviews to just be KOSMOS, 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 KOSMOS. So I thought, well, okay, let's do an anthology themed around the KOSMOS and Devir line, because they've got a lot of games. A lot of them are small games, but definitely worth looking into. So I've got 6 titles to look at today, one of which isn't one that they gave me. It's just one that I wanted to throw in as a kind of bonus game because I feel like it needs more buzz, and it's readily available as well. So without further ado, let's have a look. We're going to start on a high note with Kahuna. 2-player only strategy game. So, pretty straightforward. Forget the theme. I mean, the theme is ridiculous in this. Ancient sorcerers of the Pacific compete for dominance on an archipelago consisting of 12 islands. Using their magic and wisdom, they struggle for... Yeah, whatever. So you are basically just trying to do area control on an archipelago map. And very straightforward. You have cards with the different islands on them. You play them in order to lay these bridges between connecting islands. The idea being that once you have the majority of those paths from an island belonging to you, so let's say an island's got 5 paths heading from it, if you control 3 of them, you get control of the whole island. And of course, this is going back and forth because you can play cards to get rid of other people, your opponent's bridges. They'll be controlling islands themselves, they'll be blocking you, you'll be blocking them, and once the deck of cards runs out, there's an interim scoring phase, and there's 3 rounds total in the game. You get a point for being in the lead in the first round, 2 points in the second round, and then the difference between how many you control and how many they control in the third round. Sounds like a weird scoring system, and you'd be right for saying it, but what it does is create some very tight-ended scoring. And other than that, that's pretty much the game. The game is very simple. It is basically the poster child for a tug-of-war area control game for 2. Because you are constantly going back and forth with these islands. I've taken control of this. I'm going to nick this. Oh, God, you bought me out of this one. Oh, you've nicked my bridge. Now I haven't got that island. Oh, now I'm going to get that one off you, though. Very sort of take that cutthroat back and forth. But what you really get to do in this is set up like lots of cool combos. Because with this one, it's not enough to just simply go, oh, I'll just control that one island there, and then I'll just control that one island there. No, what you want to do is set up chain reactions. Because when you take control of an island for the first time, at that time, all the opponent's bridges go away, leaving only the ones that you have. Which means that if you can time it right and set it up with the right cards, you can create times where you take over control of one island, which as a result of the bridges goes, chain reacts and knocks out control of another 2 islands that the opponent has, which then gives you subsequent control of another island. And, the more times you can set up power plays like that, the more chance you'll have of winning. But even then, a lot of the times the games are going to finish with like a 1 or 2 point difference, if that. It's very, very tight and very, very oh my head. The decisions aren't overwhelming, but you're constantly thinking, oh, do I want to do that now? What cards he got? Because you've only got 3, I think you have a maximum of 5 cards in your hand. You basically have a hand limit, but if you choose, you can choose not to play cards and build up your hand size, because it's all well and good having oh yeah, I'll play a card, do this, play a card, do this. But then if you run out of cards, you're going to be building up for a while your opponent can just lay waste to your islands. But then on the flip side, if you spend too much time gathering cards, then you're not really going to achieve much on the map. The deck running out is another thing. You have to keep an eye on that deck to think, oh, it's running out. I need to, when's the best time? I need to hurry up and move. And there are limited quantities of each of the island cards, but you know what that distribution is at the start of the game. I think there's 2 of each, 3 of each, something like that. So it's a simple game to grasp, but it's one that rewards tactical play. They got the game attributes rating on the back, and I'm telling you this, luck, 2.5 out of 5. That'll please some of you people that hate luck in games. 4 for area control. I really don't know why that's an attribute, because it's kind of evident. 5 for card tactics, and 4 for strategy. Because really, the only luck element in this game is luck of the draw. But you can draw blind, or you can draw from a tableau of 3 cards that are face up that both players can see. So you have similar information to each other. The only thing you don't know is what you'll draw blind off the deck, or what the opponent has in their hand. But if you're keeping an eye on the cards, you can see, well, hang on a minute. Hane, the island of Hane, for example, has all the cards have been used up, which means nobody can influence that island. Well, in that case, that means my island's safe over there. So you know what? Forget that island. Let's focus on this one because the cards are still out there somewhere. I better go find them. And you can work this out. I mean, 2 veterans at this game could really have some tense, involved games. But even casual players could pick this up fine. I mean, I played this a few times against a couple of mates of mine, and you know, I'm not a veteran at it, but these 2 are also like Euro gamers, and each one was tight. I mean, never did anyone feel like they were getting whitewashed. I'm not a veteran at this game, you know, at all. I make some stupid decisions, but it's just, it is, like I said, a 2-player tug of war. You want that sort of thing, a strategic, well, not even strategic, a tactical tug of war that's pretty cutthroat and very like in your face with the opponent. You know, this is interaction, you know, times 10 here. Then Kahuna is definitely one to look at. I think it flew under the radar because it came out a while back. Not many people had heard of it, and then it went out of print. Well, KOSMOS has brought it back. It's now readily available. If you see it at a cafe, I highly recommend you give this a try. Kahuna, great 2-player game. Okay, next up, let's try Roll for Adventure. Roll for Adventure. This is a bit of a bigger title here. This is aimed squarely at families, and it is a co-op dice rolling game. Not to be confused with the ones that I might have talked about in previous videos, like Pandemic Rapid Response, or other ones like Fuse, Flatline, and the like. No, you're not doing this against a timer here, but you are rolling dice, trying to get them on various cards and spots in order to complete objectives. Essentially, this is pretty much every generic fantasy trope you've ever heard of. Oh look, we are noble, you know, heroes and warriors and magic users or whatever. Here's an enemy. Oh god, minions are attacking. We have to save the day by sticking dice on various locations in order to activate. Hang on a minute. Yeah, theme-wise, it's a little bit like off the wall here, but you know, it certainly does allow for some very pleasing aesthetics because you know everything looks gorgeous. The artwork is very colourful in this, although. Slight word of warning, if you've got problems with color sensitivity, you know, like color blindness and that, you might find some of the dice difficult to distinguish. I've had that, and certainly some spots on the board, but it's a co-op, people can help you with that, so it's not the end of the world here, but just bear that in mind. They are, you know, the color blindness I think might have been an afterthought with this one. But generally, what you're doing in this game is that you have 4 locations and you're trying to collect power stones. The main way to collect power stones is to complete objectives on all the 4 locations. And one of which, for example, you know, like a pyramid requires you to put them up in a sequential order. Another one might require you to put it in sets, you know, that kind of thing. And you'll Yahtzee style roll the dice and try and, you know, do re-rolls and try and allocate the dice to either locations or monsters that come out of a deck and try to ruin your day. You have to basically complete the objectives and get enough power stones before you lose to one of a million conditions. You know, like locations get damaged beyond repair, somebody dies, you name it, it's a co-op. There's a lot of ways you can lose. But this is basically a family dice game. You know, this is not one that I think, you know, heavy gamers or like, you know, big, like ones who want big Euro games probably aren't going to get into this one as much. But, you know, I had a bit of fun with it. It's an okay dice game. I don't think it's like the bee's knees personally, but then I'm probably not the target audience for it either. I definitely, however, can see this working well in a game cafe if someone's willing to teach it, because as simple as the game is, I'm not certain that I would trust people to literally just grab it off the shelf and learn it for themselves. You know, maybe a little bit of a tutorial is needed, but you can look up a helper app that will help you with that. And failing that, if you just buy it and, you know, bring it to your own home, you've got plenty of time to read the rules and go through it. But it is not a complex game, okay? You know, don't like misunderstand me there. It is chuck dice, re-roll, put them on stuff, work as a team, beat back monsters by putting dice of certain values on the monsters. You know, bad stuff happens to you like in every co-op game, complete the locations, etc. Now, it sounds like that's going to get a little bit sterile after a while, and I have to admit, after a few games, I kind of felt like I'd played it out. Like, there wasn't a lot more to sort of keep me coming back. But if it's one that is working with your family and your kids, for example, there is plenty of ways to up and sort of tailor the challenge. For starters, all the 4 locations are double-sided, so you can intermingle those as much as you like. Do you want all easy, all hard, or half and half? You know, you can tailor it as you go along. There are different minions you can throw into the deck, which are more powerful than others. You know, you can throw those in for a bit of a challenge spike. and there's plenty of ways to tailor it for your desired difficulty, and just to keep things afresh. On top of that, you get to control a hero with a special power, and the combinations of heroes are going to affect the game as well, although balance-wise, I'm a little bit iffy with some of the heroes, because there's some like the Shield Maiden, for example, who's like always useful. I forget her power exactly, but basically she's pretty good at dealing with the minions, and you're going to need to do that a lot. But then there's another one, a Frost Runner or something, which basically I think shifts a die from an ice cavern location onto another one. Again, that seems a little bit situational. Firstly, you need something on the ice cavern, and then secondly, where you move it to needs to be of some use. So, that or just a perpetual bonus against minions. Which one do you think is going to get used more and be more useful? Not to say that any of them are bad, but there's definitely some that are like constantly switched on and doing a lot of work for you and like really getting you the mileage, and some that are more, it will pay off when it pays off, but for now I'm just Mr. Generic. So it's not a massive gripe. I mean, there's plenty of heroes to get in you. I've lost track. How many heroes are there? 10 heroes. So a good amount of variety considering you're only using a max of 4. It's a 2 to 4 player game, although frankly, just control multiple heroes. You could easily play this solo as well. And I even tried that. It works fine solo, but frankly, it's not a game I would buy for solo purposes, really. This is more like, I want a group of people who aren't into the heavier games, they just want something light, they like chucking dice, maybe the kids like the whole fantasy aesthetic and tropes and that kind of thing. It does look gorgeous, and even the boards, it's simple artwork, but it's colourful, it's clear iconography, things make sense. Nothing is confusing in this game, it's all very accessible and very easy to play and learn, and it can wrap up in about 30 minutes. So it's got a short play time as well. Again, great for kids because of attention spans and the like. In terms of their attributes, strategy 2, well, it's a dice game, what do you expect? Luck 4, okay, yeah, it's a dice game again, what do you expect? This is not one for the strategic gamers out there. Risk assessment 4. Why they keep changing these attributes, I don't know, but essentially, yeah, you're trying to push your luck or decide, well, if I leave my dice there, it's going to get stuck. But hopefully one of us will be able to roll what we need and complete the location and get the dice back. But is that going to happen? You've only got 2 dice to roll on your turn. Can you get the symbol we need or the number we need? And, there's elements of that. And you're working as a team, so there is the cooperation aspect. Although, be warned, this can be prone to the dreaded alpha player if you're not careful, because obviously he or she will try to dictate what it is you're meant to do with the dice. But like I say, I don't think there's going to be many alpha gamers when it comes to a family setting. Again, that's what the target audience is. And for that target audience, I think it does a solid job. It's not particularly expensive. The box is probably a bit big for what it needs to be, but then the boards are not foldable. They just come in pieces. It looks nice, very simple. KOSMOS has a thing about just doing games that are very accessible. Again, top marks for that. It's fine. I just don't know if it's going to last, till that's the thing. For me, I'm kind of done. I've played it out, I'm happy. I think I'll probably donate this to the Dice Cafe, and I think they'll have a good time with it, and I'll be able to teach it on occasion. But it's not one that I'm going to sort of keep in my collection and go, all right guys, before we get stuck into Feast for Odin or Caverna, do you fancy playing Roll for Adventure? I don't see that kind of happening. But for new players, it's definitely gateway level. This is certainly a gateway game. And, if they're just into the fantasy trope, it'll work. So, for me, I don't know, it's a solid game. I can't really fault too much about it. I mean, I give it a 6 overall. It's a pretty, I didn't give a rating to Kahuna, I just found out. Kahuna would probably be a solid 8. It is a very entertaining 2-player tag game. This one, more of a 6. But I reckon for a family, it could be 7 or 8. It's just, that is definitely the target audience. I'm just not the target audience, but I can see that effort has been put into this game, that they've worked hard on the aesthetics, that they've made certain it's accessible, and as I say, I had some fun playing it. So Roll for Adventure, check it out if you want a nice, simple family gateway game. Okay, next up, let's see. I'm going to leave my surprise till last, and we'll go with, let's go with Imhotep The Duel. Now, I have it here. Bring it out. I have Imhotep. Imhotep was a KOSMOS game, funny enough. But this one was like, oh my god, super mean, but super cool. You know, gateway level game where you were basically transporting stone blocks to these different locations in order to score points in various ways. It was, you know, there was a lot of that. Well, Imhotep The Duel is the two-player version of that game, and you've seen this a lot. We've had Cave versus Cave, you know, you've had like the, well, Patchwork already did two, but you've had like code names for two. There's a lot of games where it's like, okay, this game, oh, Agricola, all creatures great and small. There's a lot of these, all right, we'll take this big game and now make a two-player version of it. They're hit and miss as to whether they work or not. You know, some do, some don't. I didn't particularly go for Cave versus Cave. I thought that was a bit of a letdown. But then Agricola, all creatures big and small, is very, very good. I'm trying to think of some other examples. Oh yeah, Duelosaur Island for Dinosaur Island. That's pretty sweet as well. Seven Wonders Duel, of course. How can I forget? That's one of my favourite games of all time. And that's a perfect two-player representation of Seven Wonders. So where does Imhotep The Duel fill in? Pretty sweet. It's kind of, I'd say it's in the middle. Kind of in the middle, upper middle. It's a solid two-player game. The way this one works is that you still have those ships that, you know, sail to the different locations. Well, they don't go to locations per se. What happens is that you have a grid board, and each boat is laid out alongside this grid with various tiles on them, little tokens. And the tokens will score you points in different ways on your player board, which can be an A or a B side, so some replay value, and it will be the same as your opponent's. And what will happen is, what you do is that you put these workers out onto the grid in order to take the boat. Now, the boats have different requirements, I believe, as to how many. I think you need at least 2 people on a row in order to like take the boat. And when you take the boat, depending on where the meeples are, you take a tile off in order from front to back or something like that. And in doing so, you put the tiles on your board and you get the points at the end of the game. So it's a very tactical, you know, decision of, all right, well, if I put my meeple there, then I'm going to hopefully get that boat. But then he knows I want that boat. So maybe he's going to put his meeple in front so that I can't get the tile, or maybe he's going to, because his meeple's also on the same row and column as something else, maybe he's going to sail that boat, which means my meeple comes off the board, because once you sail a boat, your meeples are going back to your supply. But I didn't want that row, I wanted that column, and he's going to do it just to be a jerk. There's certainly a lot of take that in this game, from like, how dare you sail that boat, I didn't want that boat. But it's pretty much the gist of the game. You're constantly back and forth with these meeples, put one out, put one out, put one out, sail a boat, put one out, sail a boat, sail another boat, put one out, put one out. You know, you've got some special cards that will give you some like bonus actions, just like the normal Imhotep. You know, if you know how to play big Imhotep, you're going to be already most of the way to know how to play this version as well. But it doesn't feel entirely like Imhotep. It's not just a direct 2-player port, because you can already play that 2 players, and it's really good fun at 2 players actually. This one just tweaks it a little bit in a different setting, but still gives you that tug of war back and forth of like, oh, what is my opponent going to do? You know, I know he wants that boat because it's got the pyramid tiles on it and he's scoring for that. So maybe if I put a meeple there, he won't be able to get them all, and then maybe I can sail him off the boat. You know, you're constantly trying to think, you know, what is my opponent going to do? What do they want? What do they think I want? So there's a lot of getting into your opponent's head. All in all, as a strategic game, it's good fun. I mean, the attributes certainly give it justification as well. 4 for strategy. There's no luck in this game. You know where you're placing the meeples. You know what's on the boats. The only bit that's random is when you fill up a boat, you fill it from a bag of tiles. You just draw 3 random ones. Well, that's a mild amount of luck, and that affects everybody. And the luck factor is 2 out of 5. So not a lot of luck in this game. But player interaction, 5. I mean, you are constantly interacting with the opponent, because what you do influences them and what they do influences you. This is like, you know, you are not just setting up your own thing and just not paying attention to the opponent, because the second you take your eye off the opponent, you're done. You will lose. And like I say, it's called The Duel, so I'm glad it feels like that, although, you know, maybe they could have had a different name for that, I suppose. If there's any problem I do have with this game, it's one, even though you've got an A and a B side for these locations, that's only going to take you so far in terms of replay value. And on top of that, one problem I do have with this is the component quality. You know, because in this one, it feels like the components are a bit of a downgrade, because in Imhotep you had the big giant cube blocks and you had the big boards and different cards. Here you've got little tiny square chits, and they're okay quality, but they're not anything to write home about. And it's just when you think about how decent Imhotep was for the price, this kind of feels like a downgrade in components. Like I say, they're not horrific. You know, you can tell what each one is, it's easy enough to tell, the graphic design is perfectly fine, but I don't know, I just wish there was something other than chits. I don't like chits, it's a GMT thing, I don't want it to be in my KOSMOS games. But that's kind of like the only small gripe I have with it. And again, replay value wise, you're gonna get, you know, you've got an A or a B side for your location. That's about as much as you're going to be able to vary the game. Yes, the games will play out differently based on what tiles come out on the boats, which is, you know, a good thing, but it would be nice to maybe have more combinations of those locations, like rather than having one board with the A's and one side with all the B's, maybe we could have had them split into 4, and that way you could have had like an A, B, C, D type thing, and then you could constantly intermingle which like ones you have on one side and which ones you have on the other. Stuff like that would have been neat, but it's a fairly low price point. You know, Phil Walker Harding, you know, he did the original Imhotep, he's done this one, so it's the same guy, you can tell there's similarities, and like I say, he's done some very good games. In fact, yeah, Barren Park, one of my favourite games that I love to teach for Gateway level, is all his doing as well. So this is a solid 2-player port. Do you need both? I don't know. I'm going to hang on to this one, I think, and I like Imhotep as well. I don't think it's, you know, do I think it's better than Imhotep though? I don't know, they're kind of on par with each other. For me, this gets a solid 7. I enjoy it, I think I'll hang on to it. Maybe I'll donate it to a cafe, I don't know. But this is one that I'm going to want to bring out every now and again because of that high level of player interaction and very simple rules, most of which are explained on the boards for you. So, KOSMOS, doing what they do best. Very good, entertaining 2-player games. Okay, next up, let's go with Devir Games. Let's bring in a Devir title. Now, I might be getting this wrong, but it's kind of like a cousin to KOSMOS in a sense, because when KOSMOS were at the UK Games Expo and other conventions, they show off some of their games as well. So you get some KOSMOS games and some Devir games. I know nothing about this publisher. This is literally the first game I have played from this publisher. Won't be the last, but it's definitely my first, and that is Vina. Have fun searching for this on Google because the fact that it's got the accent really gets in the way of that. But the idea with this is that this borrows the mechanic from Tokaido, where you are moving across this a tile row, picking up grapes, and you're trying to collect sets of grapes in order to fulfill orders at the other end. But the way that you move is exactly like the road system in Tokaido. You know, that cool Japanese Zen game where you're like trying to have the best journey in, you know, whether it's buying souvenirs or going to hot springs and that. Well, in that game, the idea was that whosever turn it was the person at the back of the row. So you tried to get as many actions as you could without losing all the stuff you really need. It was a very simple but really cool mechanism that doesn't get used a lot. It's rarely often seen. I mean, does any game do it other than Tokaido? Maybe Francis Drake with their market. I'll have to double check. It's in the other room, but it's been a while since I've played it. But this one uses that to a T. You know, you have the different grapes on either side of the row, 2 cards in every aisle, and you know, you've got the spaces, but you move your meeple based on whoever's at the back. And you have baskets which can only hold so many grapes, and the idea is that when you get to the end, there are orders where you put your barrels on. Everybody has 6, and you need to have certain requirements. So most of them will require just a single grape, and the values on the grapes ranging from anywhere between 1 and 5, depending on the variety of grape. You know, you'll need to meet a certain minimum value and have that particular grape. Great, stick the barrel in, you get some victory points. Some of them require blends, so you need to have at least 2 or 3 different grape varieties, but the predominant one must be one of them in particular. So you've got to pay attention to the values. You know, pretty straightforward. Go get grapes, stick them in the barrels, get victory points, end the game, most victory points wins. Pretty straightforward. But this one's interesting. It plays from 2 to 5 players, and I would say 5 players does add a good bit of tension for the board, but it can outstay its welcome a bit, this game. It's a 45-minute game on the box, and that's probably the minimum it's going to take you to play this. It could take you just over an hour, and for a small card game, that's just a few pieces. I mean, it achieves a lot with a few pieces, but I feel like it could have just been a little bit shorter. But, you know, that's if you're playing it with 5. It scales fine for different players because the row that you're picking the grapes from gets smaller and smaller and smaller with the player count. So you can play this with 2 just fine. I think the optimal mix is 3, maybe 4. You know, 3 or 4 is good, 2's fine, 5 is fine, but I just think 5 goes on a little bit long, and don't play this with somebody who's analysis paralysis prone either, because they'll be thinking, well, do I want to go that much further, or should I go there? It's not a complicated game. It's a pretty accessible game. You know, the rules are straightforward, although, little tip, less text, more pictures. You know, it does feel very text heavy in this one. And the sort of notation that they use for victory points is kind of a bit weird in a sense. They put them in different denominations with different looking tiles. And there's one card where if you can't put an order on a decent tile, you put it on there and it says like 0,5 to represent half. Why couldn't they just put half? I don't see why it had to be the 0,5 thing. It just looks a bit weird when you read it on the card. But all in all, the artwork is pleasant. You know, the grapes look nice and colourful. It pops on the board. Doesn't take up much table space. You know, it is a small card game at the end of the day. It's decent enough. I don't know if it will go the distance per se, but, you know, I've been saying that a lot lately. But then, like I say, games are getting good these days. They have to be able to last. But all in all, I was quite surprised with this one. You know, I mean, I love wine. I love like grapes and wine. You know, I'm into that theme and I'm into wine in general. But, you know, this one, theme-wise, it could have been anything. Yeah, you're picking grapes and you're making like wine orders, but frankly, you could have been picking potatoes and filling food orders for Tesco's, you know, for all it mattered. You could have been collecting weapons from a battlefield or something, and then giving them to the Queen. It really doesn't. The theme is fairly pasted on in a sense. You know, you're not going to feel like you're a wine connoisseur playing this game. It just allows for some nice, pretty cards with nice, pretty colours. Card quality is fine. You know, a lot of stuff is fairly small chits. Again, it's a reasonably low price point in a small portable box that shouldn't take up too much space on, say, a camping table or the like. One for families, maybe. I don't know if kids are going to really get into this, but it's a nice light gateway level game, maybe gateway plus level game, and it's a decent enough affair. I just don't think it's mind blowing. But I do think that the length is going to be a problem here because, you know, 45 minutes to an hour and a quarter crosses that threshold where it's not a filler game, but it's also a bit too long for what could be your main game of the evening. This really does need to be maybe 15 minutes shorter at least. It needs to be reliably 30 to 45 minutes every single game. But you may get times where it will stretch out to about an hour, particularly if you're you're playing it for the first time. The next big box, and that is Tribes. Dice Tower did a live play of this recently, and I've had a few games of it. 45 minutes, 2 to 4 players, another simple family weight game. The idea of this is that you are all civilization tribes, you know, tribes from the old age, and you're leveling up in different technologies. Now, it sounds more formatted than it actually is, you know, bear with me. But essentially, you're trying to meet the criteria of certain tiles in order to score victory points. And in doing so, you have a few little tiles in front of you of different terrain and some worker meeples. And you're effectively, you know, your tribe, of course. And what you're doing is you're maneuvering them around your tiles, you're getting more terrain tiles, you're going off and exploring effectively, and then depending on where your workers are on the terrain tiles enables you to gain access to certain technologies. There's 3 different tiers, you know, level 1, 2, and 3. You have to get the first level to see what the next level is. They have different requirements. And of course, as you're getting these technologies, you level up on these little tracks which make the actions more powerful. But what are these actions? Well, move, explore, procreate. It's all done by, I'm trying to think where else I've seen this system. It's similar to how the kind of Small World and Century Spice Road and Majesty for the Realm type system works, where you have a row of tiles for the actions and you can pick the first one for free, but you've got to pay to go further on. It's a very common thing. We've seen this in a million games, but it's still good fun. So it's not like it's getting old anytime soon. But the way it works is that the actions are these tiles, and you have some shells to use as the currency for going along and skipping tiles. Why it's shells, I'm not entirely sure why, but it just happens to be that way. You know, and teeth are the victory points, which makes a little bit more sense. But it's cool that when you take an action, it goes to the back of the row. So it's that constant thing of, oh, I really want to procreate, but it's miles away. I don't want to pay that many shells. And if I pay that many shells, I'm going to have not many. And then he's going to come along and nick all those shells. And then she's going to come along and basically, like, you know, take the action because she wants to do it. Tough little decisions like that. Not overwhelming, not brain burning, but pretty cool decisions in that regard. On top of this, you have events that turn up from the technologies once you've completed them, some of them anyway, and these get molded into the action row, and you can take them to trigger certain effects. That I really like. It's not something I've seen in any other version of this game where somebody can insert other things into the row. I don't think I've seen it anywhere else before, but I want to see it more often because it extends the row. You might have several events in there just taking up so much space. You've got to skip over them. Do you dare take the event? Because the event might give you nothing because it doesn't apply to you, but it stops an opponent getting several victory points. So do you take it just to waste a go, but stop them getting points? But on the other side, there's some bad ones as well. Like if you are the weakest in strength, you lose a couple of workers or a couple of victory points. And it's like, well, I'm the weakest player here. I don't want to take that thing. But then you're going to have to make sure you've got a shell to skip it every time you come across it. And until that point, you know, are the opponents ever going to take it for themselves? Or are they going to wait until you run out of shells and are forced to take it? Maybe you might want to get your strength up. There's some cool little aspects like that. I really like how the events work. I wish there was maybe a bit more variety to the events, but, you know, there's enough to, you know, just keep it nice and simple. And certainly what this game has going for it is very simple, very streamlined. It's easily one of the most accessible games I've seen from KOSMOS in terms of their bigger game range. I mean, Call to Adventure was already pretty accessible. I think this is even more accessible. It's such a simple game, you know, particularly if you've seen this type of, you know, action before. You know, the game doesn't take too long, about 45 minutes, and you should be done, an hour absolute tops. And, you know, strategy and luck is kind of mix and match. I mean, you can see what's on the board other than the unrevealed text. You can see what everybody's got in front of them in terms of terrain. You know what actions you can do. You can see the road. There's some good sort of high quality decision making in there. I mean, attribute wise, what have we got? 4 strategy, 3 luck, 4 decision making. 4 exploring seems a little bit weird as their weird attribute, because frankly, you don't really feel like you're exploring. You're basically just going, oh, I'll reach into a bag, draw a tile. Oh, it happens to be goats or wheat or whatever. You know, it's not really full-on exploring. The whole map thing in front of you is just more a way to unlock text. It's not like you know, theme is not terribly strong here. You know, you don't feel like you're exploring. You don't feel like you have your own civilization here. You don't feel like you've just leveled up in cheese making, for example, for a tech. It's more a case of, I met the criteria, give me the points, level me up on this track, then I can do it. It's very much sort of partly an engine builder, but also the whole action selection of, right, I need to manipulate this tile for my advantage. Can I get the action I want? If not, how many shells is it going to cost me? And pro tip for people here, don't let one person hog all the shells. Trust me, my friends let me do that, and yeah, I kind of walked away with the game. You really need to not let one person get all the shells, because they will have all the power, you know, all the power, because they just control pretty much what the opponents are going to do. But yeah, aesthetics-wise, the artwork is decent, and there is a reasonable amount of colour. It does sort of, you know, it looks nice on the table, but there's a lot of brown, there's a lot of dull yellows, you know, darker greens, oranges. When it all comes together, it's nice looking, but not overly pretty, if that kind of makes sense. You know, it's very much what you see on the box there in terms of its colour. Add a little bit of green, and that's pretty much the colour palette across the entire lot. So it's, you know, nothing to write home about, and certainly like the terrain tiles are nothing to write home about themselves. But all in all, it's a very accessible, family weight little Euro style game with a tried and tested mechanic that has been altered slightly to give it a bit of a new twist and feel. That is what I feel is going to make people come back to this game for more. Replay value is going to be a bit limited though, because you've only got so many events, there's only so many technologies in a row. You will see the same sort of stuff come out again. You know, maybe they could have thrown a few more in the box or added a bit more, maybe like a 4th level or something, I don't know. But you know, this will get, like, repeat itself a reasonable amount of times, you know, so I don't think this is going to be one you're going to be playing over and over and over again. but for a 45-minute game, a light game, you know, something to appeal maybe to the Euro crowd or, you know, families, it's a solid game. You know, I enjoyed it. I'm tempted to hang on to it. I don't know. I'd overall give this a pretty decent 7 as well. You know, I think it's worth checking a look at. You know, and I have to admit, I went into this thinking it doesn't exactly look much. I mean, the cover is not particularly interesting. The color palette didn't look like much, and it didn't look like the theme was strong. So I did go into this with a little bit of a down like expectations, but all in all, pretty solid. You know, I'm happy with this. This, you know, gets a 7 for me. Tribes, give it a look. And finally, you know, before the lights start wanting to play up, my present for you all. Targi. Now, yeah, hang on a minute. I know what you're thinking. It's like, look, that's the Z-Man version. What are you doing? Well, this has also come out by KOSMOS. And I don't know if Z-Man or KOSMOS did it first. But like I say, it is a KOSMOS game as well as Z-Man. So whichever way you want to look at it. But I want to talk about Targi for a second. Because Targi is one of these games that just isn't getting the buzz. And it really needs to. Targi is a 2-player only worker placement game. You don't know many of those, do you? 2-player worker placement. And it is worker placement. You have these cards that are laid out in a grid, along with another set of cards that are laid out around it, which also act as a timer of the game. And what you do is that each of you takes it in turns to put a worker on the end cards that surround the grid, in the hope that what you're trying to do is get your workers to intersect on cards that you want to take advantage of. They might get you resources, they might get you special abilities, special cards, more money, that kind of thing. And you know, what's the resources this again? There's like, you know, salt and coffee and things like that. But the idea is that you can see all the cards and you can see what other people are going, well, your other opponent's going for. So you'll put your worker out on a column and you'll be like, don't you dare go on that road. You go on that road and I'm going to get you. Don't you? Ah, phew, he went somewhere else. Right, put my guy there. But then on other times, it's like, I know he wants that card. I know he wants that card. But do I want to put my worker in that row just to screw him over? Is there any even of use so I could get there? Yeah, there is. All right, I'm going to go there. Ha-ha, in your face. And, oh, he went there. Ah. You know, and there's a lot of this back and forth. It's tug-of-war-ish, a bit like the others, but there's a lot of tension. A lot of in-your-face, like, oh, I can't believe you went there. You know, so more so than in most 4-player worker placement games. You know, this is very tight for what it is. The theme tacked on like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's not an abstract game, but yeah, the theme doesn't really make much difference. You could pretty much put whatever you like on it. Component-wise, are fairly standard. I mean, the graphic design is easy to understand, but the artwork is pretty standard. You know, you've just got basic wooden workers and wooden cylinders for where your cards intersect. And a bunch of tokens. You know, it's reasonably well produced. And this is a Z-Man version. I'm pretty sure the KOSMOS version is nigh on the same, maybe slightly identical. But it's a cool 2-player worker placement game. It takes about an hour though. This is not one that you're going to play as a filler. This is one that you're going to get a bit more involved in. So it packs a lot of thinking power and a lot of sort of engagement in a small box. And it doesn't get enough buzz because the name Targi doesn't really sort of suggest what it is and what you're doing in it. But it's a solid game. I really do heartily recommend that you give this one a look. It's a solid 8 from me. You know, it's definitely a 2-player game I've held on to for a long time. I wish I could get it to the table more often, but you know, if it's in a game cafe, it doesn't take too long to learn. Not quite pick up and play, but you could get into this reasonably well. And then after your first game, it's like, right, know what I'm doing now, let's get on with it. But all in all, this is about the tension that you get from a good worker placement game, which normally you feel like you need to find some 3-hour monstrosity with a ton of options and max out the players. No, you don't. You just need an hour, maybe even less when you're used to the game, 2 of you, and Targi. It works really well for that kind of tension. So that's my little bonus for you. This is, like I said, the Z-Man version, but you can get it in the KOSMOS version. I'm not even sure you can get the Z-Man version like this anymore, but you can definitely find it at a KOSMOS store near you. So yeah, 6 games, mostly KOSMOS, with a little bit of Devir thrown in. All in all, pretty solid titles. You know, if I can do more of these anthologies on publishers, I will, but it kind of depends what games I get thrown at me. You know, I need to have at least about 5 games, 4 maybe at the absolute minimum, at the same time to warrant an anthology. But then I could look at older games. It depends on my backlog. But yeah, KOSMOS in general do a lot of cool games. There's nothing from KOSMOS that I would say like gets into my 9s and my 10s, in terms of, oh my god, this is amazeballs, I'm going to play this for the rest of my life. But they do consistently good titles. As you can see, most of the ranks I was giving it there were 6, 7, and 8s. I gave one 6, and even then that's mainly just because I'm not the target audience. I think it's well deserving of a 7 for the right people. But Tribes, Kahuna, Imhotep, not counting Vina. Vina is a different publisher in its own right, but that's still good as well. But Targi, Lost Cities, another great game in my collection over there. I'm pretty certain that there is another, of course, Dimension, I like that as a puzzle game. I know you can't see it, but, Imhotep, the big one. I'll just get Dimension out just quick. There you go. So, that puzzle game, really like this one. It's just a nice little sort of filler puzzle. And, of course, the big Imhotep. So, they just seem to have a thing of really cracking these family weight, accessible games really well. It's their target audience, and they do a good job of it. But particularly, I definitely recommend you pay attention to their 2-player line. This is my favourite stuff from them. I like Imhotep and Dimension fine, but when it comes to the 2-player ones, Lost Cities, Kahuna, Targi, Imhotep The Duel now, there's a lot of quality 2-player KOSMOS games out there, and that's not even all of them. There are some out there, I think there's, what's it called? I don't know, is Hera and Zeus one of theirs? I'm not sure. Thunder and Lightning, I believe there's one that I've not tried. I'm trying to think, is Babel one of theirs? No, I think that's Z-Man. But, there are other titles besides these, even though I'm kind of brain farting trying to remember them all. So definitely give them a look. This is not like a paid by KOSMOS episode or anything. This is me just giving my honest opinion of saying that KOSMOS is a very good publisher, well worth a look. So that's it for me on this anthology. I'm going to get on with some editing now because my throat is a little bit wee sore. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, anthology, top 10, whatever. And, whether you're a KOSMOS fan or not, just remember, it's always only a game. And I'll see you next time.